All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to today's live stream session. We're diving into one of my favorite topics with one of my favorite people, Jim Kinney. We're going to talk about how to actually coach salespeople in freight brokerage, not just manage them. So before, just like I always do, we have a little bit of housekeeping. I'm going to start with the antitrust statement. Discussion, comments, and presentations during TIA functions must not, 1, refer to any past, present, or future rates, prices, or anything related thereto. 2, include any reference to marketing strategies. 3, include any discussion of boycotts of any person, product, or firm. Or 4, inhibit any members' employees from discussing employment with other member companies. Things you hear during the meeting that are confidential and private to TIA should not be shared publicly without its prior consent or used against or in competition with TIA. Continuing with our housekeeping, I know people are joining us from YouTube and from LinkedIn, a couple of different places. Jim and I will be following along with the comments. So if you have any questions along the way that you want Jim to answer, throw those in there, and we will be sure to get to them towards the end whenever we get to Q&A. So with that, Jim, are you ready to jump right in?
Chris, I just absolutely, Jonathan, can't tell you, I have absolutely crystally lined out all the cool notes that we need to cover today. So let's rock and roll. How's that?
All right, sounds good. So you and I both know managing numbers is the same as developing people. So why do you think that distinction gets lost so often with managers?
Actually, I'm going to give credit to some folks that did research on this in the late 1990s from Florida, Arizona, and I think it was Oklahoma State, my alma mater. I'll throw them in, a guy named Ray LaForge. And these professors all looked at how people develop. And in business, okay, if you're not managing by the numbers, okay, then you're just not doing it well. So the over-reliance on numbers really came from the 80s and the 90s, the MBA push to where KPIs developed and how to do that. But coaching the coach is a skill set that is how do you teach that process. So it never got the attention because we drove everything by the numbers. So if you're coaching by the numbers first, then you're missing, is this a skills problem or strategy problem? And the numbers came second. So it's the one area of sales management where you need to lead with skills and strategy first and the numbers follow. And other aspects of sales management, numbers do lead first. So it's a really great question. And honestly, Jonathan, it's just a function of how the world works. What does my scorecard look like?
Mm-hmm. How have you seen the sales environment shift over the past few years, with the market and everything else going on, especially in freight? And what does that mean for, people who are coaching their employees today?
The spot market's not going away. Okay, let's just clarify. But the evolution of transactional for selling, right? Consultative or major account selling and enterprise selling has shifted significantly. So in the year 2000, there was $1 billion player in the industry. In 2025, there are $22 billion firms. So that shift of going up market and the sophistication of selling has changed. The process or the steps, okay, phases, let's say, pre-call to post-call, the tasks that are completed there are significantly different than if you're just picking up the phone trying to get freight from a shipper. So there's no doubt it's gone upstream significantly. Major account selling and enterprise sales or consultative selling, there's dozens of different terms. Jonathan, you and I have talked about all of them in projects. That movement has been the biggest change in the last probably 3 to 4 years.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, why don't we let's strip it back a little bit, Jim. We'll go back to coaching the sales process itself. So we'll start at the foundation. Every brokerage has a sales process. We'll just assume that, but not every manager knows how to coach it. So how would you go about coaching the coach, essentially?
Okay. So you coach the coach by teaching them how to teach it. All right. So you go to a sales manager, and here's my date on this. Very honorary of me. I'll say, all right, okay, write out the answers to these 4 questions. What are the 6 steps of the sales process? Okay. And they'll struggle with that sometimes. Okay. What is the vital behavior of those 6 steps? And can you tell me the vital behaviors in each of those 6 steps? And then they struggle. So what happens is you realize, okay, you're teaching or coaching how to do that, and not just how to be a good salesperson. So let's go back on, and you say, all right, what are the 6 steps of the sales process? And we go pre-call planning, sales call opening, needs assessment, solution development, okay, obtaining commitment or closing the follow-up. Okay. Which of those is the vital behavior? Well, all of them. Well, actually, that's not the answer. Okay. It's needs assessment. So what are the vital behaviors of each of those steps? So what you're actually doing is say, how would you teach this? Okay? How would you coach this? And that's where it falls apart.
Mm-hmm.
They have no idea.
Right. Do you find that some of those steps are not necessarily overrated, but maybe overemphasized by managers?
Oh my gosh. Okay. How many books have been written on closing? Okay. If you I did a survey in 2007, 2008. TI members say, what's the most important step of selling? And everybody writes down closing. If you don't close, you're not making any money. Well, you know what? If you don't identify their needs, they're never going to buy from you in the first place. If you have not connected on what is their biggest worry and can you fix it? So there are now dozens of wonderful, research studies that you can read that will show that closing is not the most important part of selling. In fact, actually, it's one of the easiest parts of selling. How's that, Jonathan?
Yeah. I mean, I think we probably see, Jim, and I know we've talked about this in committee meetings and between the two of us, right? Top performers are the ones that get kind of pushed up the management ladder more often. And so you see those top performers move into those management positions. What are some things that you usually have to go back and remind them of when they're trying to teach other people how to do something, right? Because those people, it might not come as naturally to them as it did to that top performer. So like, what are some things that you have to go back over with them usually to help them teach better?
Okay, so let me flip that back on you. Okay. Who's the greatest basketball player to ever set foot on a court?
Michael Jordan.
What kind of coach was he when he was with the Hornets?
Not a very good one.
Who was the best? Who do you think is one of the best coaches ever to coach in the NBA? How about Phil Jackson?
Phil Jackson too.
Okay, so, and I picked Phil because he coached Jordan. So Phil wins, with the Bulls, 6 championships, and then he goes to the Lakers and he wins some more, right?
Right.
What kind of player was Phil at the New York Knicks? You can look him up, by the way.
He was we'll say serviceable. He was on a roster to play a lot of minutes.
Hey, kudos. He made it to the show, as they say.
Yeah.
So the skill set to be an exceptional salesperson or a player on the court is very different than the skill set to be a good coach. By the way, Phil made it to the NBA. Michael made it to coach in the NBA. Neither one is known for, Jackson's not known for being an exceptional player. He's known for being an exceptional coach. Mike is known for being the best guy to ever step foot on those 90 feet, not for being the best coach. Okay. So the skill set problem so the issue is, hey, if I'm really good at this job, I'm going to be great at this job.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at any list of the top 5 criteria to be a great salesperson and be a great sales coach, they do not overlap.
Right. Yeah.
It's a completely separate skill set. And that's the best way to pick on Jordan and Jackson is the best way to illustrate that.
Yeah. Do you feel like that new sales managers are kind of pressured to coach outcomes specifically? Like, did you close this deal, that kind of thing, instead of the actions that are getting them to the successful outcome that they're looking for?
I couldn't add to that, Jonathan. We talked about this in terms of when we've been on panels together before. You're exactly correct. So we call it the efficiency and effectiveness model, the best way to teach that. You have sales rep A, sales rep B, and sales rep C. Okay. Efficiency is, okay, you make 80 calls a day. That's your what you have to do.
Mm-hmm.
Well, sales rep A, okay, has a close rate, okay, of 5%. Okay, their effectiveness, okay, 80 times 5, okay, is what number? It's 20. Whereas sales rep B, okay, he only makes 60 calls a day, okay, but he has a 20% effectiveness, right? Okay? It's very different. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so you got 4, okay, 80 at 5% is a 4. I said I misspoke there, okay. Versus somebody who makes 60 and they got 20, that's 12. So would you rather have somebody who did 4 quotes a day or 12 quotes a day, Jonathan?
12.
That's a rhetorical question. Yeah, 12. How about the next guy, okay, who does 60 calls a day, okay, and gets that, then or 80 and the, okay, 20%, and you get 16.
Mm-hmm.
So there's always a trade-off, okay?
Right.
If you coach towards the outcome or the input variable, you've made a huge mistake. It's the output. So I'd rather have a team of people who produce me 12 quotes a day at 60 calls versus somebody who's producing me 4 quotes a day at 80. Mm-hmm. So there is a balance between the efficiency. You have to do so much, but the effectiveness is how well you do it. So the best coaches, okay, we reoriented to think about how do you coach effectiveness, not efficiency, because efficiency is easy. It's built in, right?
Right.
But how are we taught to focus on the effectiveness? Okay, nope. We're taught to focus on the efficiency, the number of calls you make, the number of emails you send. Okay? But how many emails have you really gotten from somebody, a vendor trying to sell you something as director of education, okay, that are really good, that it's like, hey, here's a problem we have in our education group. I'd like to talk to this guy, versus somebody who's just, spamming you,
right,
talking about features and benefits of their LMS system or their AI analytics system.
Yeah. They don't come in very often, to be totally honest. And we get a lot.
But when you get a good one, what happens?
Oh, I usually try and reach out and set up a time for us to talk more about whatever they sent over, because they could, you could tell they did a little bit of research on what we offer and who we're, trying to build education products for.
Okay, repeat that. They did a little bit of research to find out what we're doing at TIA and what they could offer that would help us.
Right.
Wow, what a great statement. That is what a good sales coach does, is teach those young men and young women working for them how to do that and not just worry about the 80 calls a day.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the effectiveness of any sales coach is, how do you modify the behavior of the young men and women you're coaching?
Right. And speaking of, what your pre-call planning process, because I know you cover that a lot in our fundamental sales class. So should we talk a little bit about prospecting and how that works, or should we move on to some other sales?
Well, just real quickly, okay. Leads and prospecting are really very important. As a smaller firm, obviously a lot of sales reps handle that. As a larger firm, that really is a marketing task. It truly is. So if you get a good database, all right, you're home free. So let's say that you are working the West Coast, you've done a lot of produce work. Obviously, it makes sense to get prospect. Join the California Strawberry Growers Association. Huge, okay? The Florida Nurserymen's Growers Association. So in other words, you find that group, and that really is, so really the prospecting and getting that message out and refining that, that's a marketing task that feeds into the sales task. So you can find the leads. That's not the problem I run across when I do studies. Mm-hmm. So always, okay, the sales manager has gotten a good lead system going. Okay? Where it falls apart, and this gets me in trouble, okay, The marketing team has generally done a pretty good job there. It falls apart where the sales team doesn't take those good leads and do the research appropriately before they pick up the phone and make that call, or the target market message is a marketing. That's where they fail. They do a blast out instead of customizing it. So
Right.
12 customized messages will outpull, 40 spanned generic messages.
Right. Yeah, if we're going to skip prospecting, let's jump into the sales call specifically and how we can kind of master that. So can you break down where sales calls typically fail? Lack of prep, unclear objectives, poor listening, bad openings, all the stuff we kind of cover in our different sales classes.
I can, little regression analysis. Okay. Let's go from the, so pre-call planning, you can do a poor job and still make a phone call at the opening. Okay, you can do a poor, mediocre opening, and if you get the right question, hit the right thing that needs assessment, you can have it. Okay? We know that the breakdown sales process occurs in the first 3 steps. The third one being the most screwed up. Okay, quality of the questions. So to make each step easier, here's what we know. 4 or 5 different studies I've conducted, thousands of research things. If you do pre-call planning, the vital behaviors are typically 2 things. You need to know where their locations are, and you need to know about their products. You can do a bunch of things, but when you go to any website, familiarize yourself. Where are their plant locations? Where are their DCs? Right? You need to know where they're located.
Right.
Number 2, you need to know about their products. So the example I always use, or the last 2 years, I evolve and change about every 2 or 3 years. Indiana Popcorn. We know Indiana Popcorn has a location, in Waukegan, Illinois, right? Which is hysterical. Their Indiana Popcorn locations in Illinois, Waukegan. We know that they have 7 flavors. Recently, they've added a non-GMO, which is very big, right? Healthy. They've added a kosher line. Are you with me? So if you can pick up the phone with location and product knowledge, you've now covered the vital behaviors. You've demonstrated you're different. Now you're opening, which is the second phase. It also has 2 vital behaviors, a client-centered fact and a client-focused question. So back to why, while prospecting or leads are important, we can find food manufacturers in the upper Midwest. We can find them in Ohio, Michigan, right? Illinois, Indiana, Minnesota. That data is easy. You need to now go to the manufacturer and find out locations and products. Those locations and products help you do your opening. And now they help you ask better needs assessment questions. Because none of that goes, the last item on my list is, it's not about rapport development. It's about professionalism.
Right.
That drives me nuts when somebody says, well, my guys just don't really know how to develop rapport. You can go read in the Journal of Professional Selling and Sales Management. This was first studied, Jonathan, in 2001, I think was when this article was published, maybe 2002. These professors basically looked at how important is rapport in the B2C world versus the B2B world. On the B2B world, rapport is a byproduct. It's the 4th most important thing. So if I call you up, right now, let's do an example. I'll say, hey, Jonathan, hey, how's it going today?
Good.
How do you respond to that? But if I say, good morning, Jonathan, Jim Kinney with TI Logistics. Hey, congrats on the new launch of your non-GMO popcorn. How well is that selling for you guys?
Yeah, you're diving a little deeper there.
Right. I've asked you a question about something that said you just launched this in 2025. I've started the conversation. I forced you to engage. So we know the vital behaviors are client-centered fact, client-focused question. But the purpose of an opening is to differentiate yourself from the other salespeople that are calling, and B, start the conversation. So anything you do when you're coaching us, so let's go back to a coach listening to that opening, right?
Mhm.
And he's like, hey, Jim, okay, you don't need to ask the clients how they're doing today. Okay? Everybody's asking them that. They're busy, they're swamped, they got, okay, engage them differently and start the conversation. So if I say, hey, Jonathan, Jim with TI Logistics, congrats on the new non-GMO you've launched. How was that selling for you guys this year?
Pretty well so far.
Well, cool. That's actually the reason I've called. Okay, we've got about 20 to 30 trucks a month within 20 miles of your Waukegan facility. Most would love to get down to the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Any chance we could haul some of that cheddar popcorn down there for you?
Yeah, I think so.
So even if you say no, okay, we've started a conversation. What in our studies we found out, okay, that sales coaches don't do, they don't say, stop, Jim. Don't ask them how they're doing today, okay? Just tell them good morning, good afternoon, okay? Differentiate with the fact, start the conversation. Then you role play that till you change that young man or lady's behavior, okay? Just like the pre-call planning. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Go through a list and go, yeah, the company was formed in 1937, you know, they've got this great social function and they want to save the world, and they give 30% of their revenue to all that's well and good, but the traffic manager doesn't want to discuss that.
Right.
Traffic manager, okay, is looking at 3 computer screens just like you are at your brokerage desk, okay, trying to move 1,500 loads a month.
Yeah.
That's her worry or his worry, right? So it's a great question you ask, but the honestly, what doesn't get coached is the vital behaviors that will change how well they're perceived by the
Yeah. Little sidebar, because I know you and I have heard some pretty truly painful call openings over the years. Do you have one off the top of your head? We won't call anybody out, but do you have one off the top of your head that you could give us as an example of, and then how you would reframe it to make it better?
Okay, so back to the opening. Okay,
Mhm.
Let's take something like this. Okay, you teach a young man to do this, and I want you to ask me this question. I'm going to answer the phone. I'll be Popcorn, Indiana. Okay, and you ask me, hey Jim, do you need any help out of your Waukegan facility?
Okay.
Popcorn, Indiana. This is Jim.
Hey, Jim, do you need any help moving trucks out of your Waukegan facility?
No, we're good right now. Thanks so much for calling. Click. Now, I have to coach you. I'm like, all right, Jonathan, we're taught to ask open-ended questions, correct?
Mm-hmm.
What if I told you actually it's not whether the question's opened or closed-ended, it's whether the question is psychologically critical to the buyer.
Right.
Now, before you called him, you know he's in Waukegan, right?
Yep.
Or did you go to the operating system and like say, hey, how many trucks did we have in the last 30 or 60 or 90 days that were within 20 miles, okay, that we pulled out of Waukegan? You can find that, okay, in any of your operating softwares, correct?
Yep.
So why don't you go find out how many trucks we have whenever you call somebody within the list, okay, the last 60 days within 20 miles of that facility, and then 2, find out where most of them went and offer that as a lane. So the opening we get past the opening and say, hey, Jonathan, how well is your kosher popcorn you introduced this year selling? Give me an answer. So, hey, Jonathan, Jim at TI Logistics, how well is that kosher popcorn you introduced selling this year?
Really well so far.
Outstanding. Listen, that's why I've called. I did a little quick research. We have 40 trucks that are about 20 miles of your facility every month. About half of them would love to get to Texas. Any chance we could haul some kosher popcorn down to Texas for you?
Yeah, I think we can talk about that.
Now, you asked me, did I need any help out of Waukegan?
Mm-hmm.
That's a very broad, open-ended question. What's wrong with that is if I say no, where do you go now, Jonathan?
Got to think on your feet.
Exactly. But if I say, hey, I've got 40 trucks on average. About half these guys would love to get back to Texas. Do you need some assistance into Texas? You're forced to specifically answer that question. Now go ahead and say no to Texas. Say, Jonathan, any chance you guys need to get down into Texas?
No, I don't think so.
Well, that's great. So you got great carrier coverage there. Well, good. Listen, the other portion of this group needs down to the southeastern corridor. They'd either go to Florida, South Carolina, or North Carolina. Would that be beneficial?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So what's happened is by asking about something very specific, we're extending the conversation. That's what coaches don't do. They don't teach how to do something fundamentally well. All right, I'm going to ask you a question now. Let's flip this around. It happens in anything. How long have you been coaching soccer?
Probably almost 20 years now.
Okay. How often during practice do you take a group of high school kids and set them do set plays to do a corner kick? How many times do you run that?
I wouldn't say often, but often enough to where they hopefully remember it on the weekend.
Okay. So in other words, you're teaching them all the dynamics of a set position.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you have to teach them also for throw-ins, okay, free kicks. Selling's the same thing. Every step of selling has specific vital behaviors. The pre-call planning, the opening, right? I'm struggling to get, sorry, trying to get the dog to quit barking in the background. My apologies for the audience. So the pre-call planning, the opening, the needs assessment. So let's go to needs assessment. All right. What are the critical behaviors there? And it's the questions you ask.
Mm-hmm.
Which question's better? Okay. Hey, Jonathan, okay, do you need any capacity out of Waukegan, okay, into Texas? Versus, okay, do you need any assistance out of, okay, Waukegan into South Carolina? Okay. By asking specifics, you're going to engage a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
If I ask you, hey, how many truckloads do you ship out of there a month? Who does that benefit? Me or?
Well, it benefits you.
Yeah. But the meeting's about the prospect. So wouldn't you be better asking them if they need help into Texas, okay, South Carolina, versus asking them how many truckloads they ship?
Right. Yeah.
So, and that's really the challenge.
Yeah. Well, we hit a little bit on objections, right? So, if you're making 60, 80, 100 calls a day, like people are told they're supposed to, and you're getting rejection after rejection after rejection, what are some things that how can we take those rejections and make them more of an opportunity to learn rather than just, move on to the next thing?
Okay. What have we talked about so far? Every step has a vital behavior,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
So you've heard me do this when we've talked about this. I want you to pretend you're a rookie sales rep and say, hey, you know what? Listen, thanks for calling, but all of our freight's vendor routed, Jonathan. What do you do? Hey, Jonathan, thanks for calling, but all of our freight's vendor routed.
Well, hopefully you'll keep us in mind for next time if something comes up in the future.
Okay. You answered that only because we've done this so many times. Okay. You answered that perfectly. That's what 95% of the young sales reps with less than a year's experience do. Okay. They do it simply because how to respond to that. So the vital behaviors are for objection handling. They're very simple. Step one, acknowledge that you heard the objection. Acknowledge the objection. Most people dodge it. How infuriating is that when somebody's asking you a question, okay, topic you want to talk about, and they ignore you, Jonathan?
It's pretty frustrating.
Okay, that's human nature, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a shipper and you pass this information on, okay, and you get ignored, you're not endearing yourself in any way to the prospect, are you? In fact, what have you done to that individual by ignoring?
Probably driven them away a little bit or made it harder to come to a deal at some point.
Right. So let's go back. So if there's an objection or something needs to be discussed, then you need to ask a question about it, which is the second vital behavior. So you acknowledge it and you ask a direct question. So let's go back and you say, hey, Jim, thanks for calling. All of our freight is vendor routed. I say, terrific. How long is that? So I say, terrific, Jonathan. I'm sorry. My notes indicated something different. How long have you been routing the freight with your vendors at Popcorn, Indiana?
Oh, since recently.
Okay. So was that a change during COVID because your volumes fell after that? Or what drove you guys to go to vendor routed freight?
Probably COVID, but it just took us a little longer to get there.
Okay. So what's happened is, okay, I've let you know I've heard this. Okay. So now I'm going to come back with, okay, well, as freight's evolved and come back out of that, okay, how have you managed to, okay, keep the trucks that you need that you had before? What happened to that equipment?
It just kind of dried up, I guess. There just wasn't enough around.
In other words, okay, I'm engaging you talking about, okay, when did you make this change? Okay, was it driven by COVID when after freight exploded and it fell off?
Mm-hmm.
What we know is I need to get to, okay, why you did it, what do you do now, and then what are you going to do when volume pops back up? Okay, and then eventually I'm going to ask you, because, hey, do you have guys that are, okay, less than stellar about bumping your dock and efficiently doing that? If you find a lane that is, can you pass my name along there? Because you're not going to give me the name of your customers, right?
Right. Yeah.
But in other words, we teach them through role plays, and you can do that with any objection. I picked that one because that is the de facto thing I'm hearing right now is how do you get somebody off the phone? It's vendor routed.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's funny because we hauled 34 loads for you 2 years ago.
Right.
So I'm being tongue in cheek there. You can't, but actually I'm not. It's the truth. We see that a lot when we look at data. So objection handling, the vital behaviors are acknowledge that you heard it, and then you come back with a direct question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, probably the biggest thing, right, that we hear through classes when we see people at Capital Ideas, that kind of stuff, is around relationship development and negotiation coaching. Like we get asked, you and I get asked that a lot. I get asked if we can put classes on about that. You probably get asked that pretty directly. So, why are those so important, especially the long-term relationship development? We talk about that with Chris Jolly. I know that's a big part of his story.
Absolutely. Can I jump back just a second to the component of rapport?
Yeah.
By the way, I didn't say rapport development's not important. What I said was it's not the most important thing on the front end of the sales call.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to move to answer that first and then come back to your question, if that's okay, because it'll really make more sense.
Sure.
Relationships matter greatly, but what we don't coach is how do you get to where you have a great relationship? We have worked together now for, what year did you start TIA again?
2019.
Okay, so in that 7 years, it was 2026, okay, our first meetings were very formal. They were agenda driven, very polite, very professional, boom, 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 okay. So professionalism begets credibility, because if you transfer knowledge, okay, then you're helping the other side. So one of my first questions to you is I said, hey, Jonathan, you asked, what are the brokers like? What are they doing? And I gave you a scenario. I said, how does that compare with what you're familiar with? And you told me about your life at Halliburton and how you worked with men and women who are in the oil fields, different facilities. I go, you're going to love it. You're going to fit in perfect, because brokers and dispatchers, we are blue collar kind of people. We deal with trucks. Okay? So professionalism gets you credibility. We talked about how you had to teach math and algebra to a bunch of roughnecks. Very important for, okay, when you've got drilling rigs that are cost literally hundreds of millions of dollars, right?
Right.
Mistakes. So if you think about it, you were successful because you were professional. These guys loved you. You showed up in blue jeans, okay, in a polo shirt. You didn't show up in a suit or a sports coat and a tie, right?
Right.
So professionalism gets you credibility. Credibility, when you demonstrate knowledge, okay, and you can assist, gets you trust. And from there, when you trust somebody, you start to develop large amounts of rapport.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where relationship comes from. Okay. As those relationships expand, because of the trust and credibility and professionalism, they start to just give you things.
Mm-hmm.
And that develops. So back to your question about relationships, okay, I cannot in any way say that rapport is not important. It's not the most important part in the front end of a sales call. So when you're coaching that, okay, you won those guys over. Why did you win those guys over at Halliburton? All those roughnecks, and you're teaching them algebra and math and analytics for drilling. How did you win them over, Jonathan? Think about that.
Well, we were trying to meet them where they're at, and then I'll also kind of teach them the right way to do things so that they could progress in their careers at Halliburton specifically.
And teaching the right way. I was hoping to use these words, but you were teaching the right way. You were teaching them specific vital behaviors for the different jobs that you coached on.
Right.
So the same thing works here. Okay? Brokers are by nature really sharp people. They are. I have signed NDAs with well over 200 brokerages in the last 3 years, and I'm always amazed that the best salespeople, the best brokers, are really bright. Okay? Where they excel, okay, and I truly mean this, is okay, they have learned to adapt. Okay, their emotional intelligence, their EQ, their emotional quotient is off the Richter scale.
Mm-hmm.
What we do is not exactly neurosurgery. Not being cruel when I say that, but okay, here's the business model. We get freight from a shipper and we sell it to a carrier. What could go wrong? Everything. Right. But okay, that emotional intelligence is, they know how to read the room, the temperament of the voice, the enunciation, and sometimes it's the F-bomb that comes across and lets you know that they're furious. Okay? They adjust to that and they figure out, what question do I need to ask to solve that problem? So the relationship development is the third part of selling that needs assessment. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Am I asking the right question at this point in time? And that's where role plays come in. So when I do dozens and dozens of, well, you've seen this, how many TI conferences all right, let's do role plays, and then the group gets started, and then they just love that. So when we do that, Jonathan, what we're really doing is focusing on the vital behavior. That's where the relationship gets developed.
Mm-hmm.
I've got this problem, I'm angry, or you guys have dropped the load in this. How do you fix it? We earn our credibility through our knowledge basis and how we help them attack a problem.
Mm-hmm.
We don't earn it. Everything's what we earn our credibility because we move the freight. No, that's what they paid you for in the first place, Jonathan. They gave you $2,732 because they want you to pick it up on time. They want you to drop it off on time. Okay? They wanted you to keep the notice of the progression out, and they didn't want you to damage it.
Right.
Or let it get stolen. That was the minimum. So when somebody says, well, we provide great service, no, that's where it starts. So the relationship stuff that you just asked about, is like Halliburton, you met them where they're at. And not to be cruel, but what if you'd gone in there, okay, in a pair of dress slacks, tasseled loafers, and a tweed jacket?
Wouldn't have gone over very well.
Okay, but when you showed up in jeans, you'd been on the site, they'd seen you, okay, and you got boots on, and how did you engage them with credibility, Jonathan?
Well, they've seen you in their work environment, so they know you know what you're talking about. That's number one, and number two, that you're willing to go to them or have them come to you to make sure that they get the information they need to be successful and safe, number one, at their job.
Let's flip that to brokerage, okay? Would a prospect or a shipper evaluate you then on how you interact with them in their environment?
Well, I would assume you would do some site visits at some point, right? To go meet them where they're at in their office.
Okay. How about carriers? How you talk to them and how you talk to the drivers? Same thing, correct?
Right. Yeah. More conversational.
So your credibility is you meet them and you're asking questions about their job, their tasks, their worries or concerns. Okay. You're not talking about TIA brokerage.
Right.
They care less.
Right.
And that always hurts people's feelings. Like, I hate to break it to you, okay? They don't care how many offices you've had. They don't care how many years you've been in business, okay? They will believe you when you come across as professional, and the credibility of your questions will show you to be different than the people else. So if instead of you asking me, hey, Jim, how many loads do you move out of that Waukegan facility? Now, what do they weigh and do they need a point? No, all that stuff helps me.
Right.
So you meet them right and you say, hey, how well is that new John GMO selling? How well is the kosher selling? By the way, okay, what's your biggest market growth that you guys didn't expect? Meet them about their locations and their products and what they're doing. Okay? When you're talking to the carrier, the same thing. So again, professionalism will get you credibility. The credibility comes from the knowledge that you're sharing with them. Okay, that gets you trust. Professionalism begets credibility. Credibility begets trust. Trust begets rapport.
Mm-hmm.
Now that we've talked, I don't know how many hundreds of phone calls we've had in the last 7 years, emails, literally thousands probably. 25, 30 times we've done meetings together at least.
Mm-hmm.
That number, okay? Well, that gets us down to the trust and credibility where you can text and say, hey, Jim, would you mind looking at this or talk to this person? Or I can say, hey, Jonathan, this firm's shown this interest in TIA. You can just hand something off because you know it's going to take place. That's the part of coaching that really gets missed. So back to your question, okay? Where does the relationship come from, Jonathan? Really for the coach and the sales rep.
Well, it's over time, right? And it's the coach showing interest in the sales rep, builds that rapport over time, especially if you're able to help them and be successful,
Okay, so let's flip that. Okay. Earlier, you asked about 20 minutes ago about numbers and managing by the numbers and the danger of that. Yep. So if I come to you and say, hey, Jonathan, this week, I know you're a little off. You're only averaging 62 calls instead of 80 calls. Okay, you need to increase your dials.
Mm-hmm.
How does that kind of coaching? Okay, how does somebody respond to that opening? What was wrong with that specific phrase? It sounds good. Hey, you've got a metric of 80. I've just told you you're averaging 62. I've asked you to pick it up. So there's a number, there's a performance, there's a true gap. I'm reminding you to close that.
Right.
Unfortunately, what's wrong with that specific category of coaching?
Well, you're coming to me with your problem, not necessarily my problem, because there might be something going on personally or professionally that's keeping me from meeting that number. And so to me, it's just telling me you're more worried about yourself than what's going on with me to help me meet that number.
Yeah. And another manager is going to go, well, hey, it's his problem too. He's supposed to be doing 80, he's doing 62. But back to the parable we're all taught as children when we're 5. Okay. Remember the teacher blindfolds the 6 kids and he says, I'm going to give you something to hold. What is it? Mm-hmm. The first little girl says, oh, it's a carpet. Next one says, no, it's a rock. The third one says, you're an idiot. It's a tree trunk. The fourth one said, no, it's a brick wall. The fifth one says, it's a snake. The other goes, no, it's a rope. The teacher says, you're all right. It's an elephant. They take their blindfolds off. The first little girl's holding the ear. She thinks it's a carpet. Second one's holding the tusk, thinks it's a rock. The third one's holding the trunk, thinks it's a snake. The fourth one, the leg, it's a tree trunk. The fifth one, the side of the elephant, it's a brick wall. The sixth one, the tail, it's a rope.
Yeah.
It's just perspective. So when you coach, it's just like selling. When you coach, it's just like selling. Your questions should be focused around their need,
Mhm.
not yours.
Right.
So let's go back to that scenario, okay? 62 calls, okay? I focus on the calls, okay? But what if I notice that, hey, the last 3 weeks you were averaging, okay, 3.2 quotes a week. And remember, this is a young person. They're 22, 23 years old, and they've only been with you for 4 or 5 months. I noticed that you did 5.1 quotes last week.
Mhm.
So open with, okay, Metro say, hey, Jonathan, okay, I noticed you jumped. Forget the call thing. I noticed you jumped from, okay, 2.7 quotes for the last 3 week average, and now you're at 3.9. Okay, that's a 1.2 quote. That's a 36% growth. How'd you get them? How are you getting the more quotes these days? What's going on?
I mean, that's a much better way to start, right?
Yeah, I didn't start with again. Okay, an input metric's not the same as an output. Now, what if the output metric's miserable? It hadn't changed. Then I say, help me understand. Okay,
Mhm.
what part of the process are you stumbling over? Okay, if I'm asking you needs-based questions, so that's where the relationship comes out of that.
Right.
So internal selling, that's what coaching is. Okay? What is their need? What is their problem? So next question, I guess.
Well, we're coming towards the end, Jim, so we always like to have some actionable things that we can share with the audience. So what's one simple habit a sales manager can start doing this week to become a better coach?
Grab your pens, write this. Number 1, identify the missing vital behavior in their skill set. The first thing you should do is you got somebody young and you're sitting out there on the floor, you got young kids all around you. They're not kids, they're young adults all around you, okay? The first thing is identify the missing vital behavior. What is keeping that person, okay, from being successful? What is the missing behavior that's not doing? Number 2, okay, engage them, just like the sales call opening, engage them about that behavior, just like I did with you.
Yep.
And then you have a choice. Okay. The third vital behavior is, okay, you have to test them to see, do they know that and they're not doing it properly, or do they not know it and you're going to have to teach them through role play. So the best way to coach something on the floor, okay, or one-on-one is through a role play. So if I can go back to you and I say, hey, the missing vital behavior is your openings are just sloppy. Okay, you're still saying, "Hey, Jim, how are you doing today? What's going on?" Or how I see you're in Kansas City. Okay, the Chiefs suck this year. Okay? Neither of those is really critical developing a good successful sales call. So like, all right, okay, Jonathan, what are the 4 steps of pre-call planning? And you're like, name, or you're like, well, I need to read about us, get their latest press releases, look for their locations and look about their product. Which of those are the vital behaviors? You tell me. I said, all right, then why aren't you using those in your opening? Why just don't think they're relevant? Okay. All right. Selling's hard, correct, Jonathan?
Yeah.
So you don't think they're relevant. But remember in the training, we had data that actually shows you that if you use a client-centered fact and client-focused question, that increases the likelihood of differentiation and starting conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious, if you know that, you believe in the data, why are you making your job harder than it is, Jonathan?
Yeah.
So coaching, means you identify missing vital behavior, you engage them, and then you actually have to ask them, if you know this, why are you? If you don't know it, then I have to go back and redo role plays. So for anybody listening, identify the missing vital behavior, engage them, either determine whether they really know it or not. If they know it, okay, you do the role plays again, and that's fine. If they don't know it, then you have to reteach it, then you do the role plays. So that would be the single best piece of advice for improving any sales rep is coach them on the vital behaviors that are missing.
Yeah. And coaching is all about, identifying those gaps, right? And as a coach, it's very easy to assume what the gaps are. And if you have a way or some kind of process to tease it out of the person, you usually get a lot more better information on what you need to coach them on rather than just guessing, well, they must not be good at this, so that's what we need to work on.
And you know what? That works so well. I had a phone call with a gentleman the other day that handles over $200 million worth of business. He's 49 years old. Okay? This is not a newbie. Okay. Right. So the same thing happens there, but it's on a much more sophisticated level. Okay. Then you might be looking at the data, and are you looking at the data the right way and asking the right questions? So coaching, regardless of, remember we started out today talking about new reps and where to go, and that's the bulk of where careers start. It doesn't matter. So this particular gentleman, okay, was challenged by not wanting to push back on the data interpretation. And that was simply this particular shipper realized, okay, that they were fundamentally making some errors in terms of how they shipped that data, or how they shipped that product, and the data told them that. He didn't want to talk about that. So even then you can get an objection. We have to address those significantly and directly. It's one thing to talk about a single load. It's another to talk about 18,412 loads, right?
Right.
But that's where the emotional quotient really matters. How you approach those questions, and with the gentleness, yet the directness required. So we coach there is speak softer, slower. So we know the more detailed the question and the more direct you ask it, and with a softer tone, enhances engagement versus if you get your back up. So coaching, vital behaviors differ on enterprise selling, major account selling, and good old-fashioned spot market transactional selling. But they're there in every phase, and we've looked at how that happens. So you can carry this through at any level, Jonathan. This type of coaching doesn't matter. It's a 22-year-old or a 49-year-old. You're just working on different behaviors based upon the type of selling it is. That's all.
Yeah, Jim, I think that's a perfect place to end this. So as always, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much for doing this for us. I know you put a lot of time aside for TIA. We really appreciate it.
I love this stuff, and I can't thank you enough. I'd like to throw out a little blurb. We got a new program, as you know, as director on our Freight Leadership Lab, and certainly encourage people to look at that and the things we do. Additionally, Jonathan, you're so nice. I'd like to throw out is remind people, reach out to you, and if they have an education idea or something they want to do, we will, arrange these to do them in-house for them, or we will absolutely develop a class for a conference or a lunch and learn too. So guys, if you have something at all, please reach out to Jonathan at TIA, and he will gladly work with one of his various instructors and get something developed for you, right? So
yep, we sure will. So Jim, with that, thank you again. Thanks everybody for watching. This has been recorded, so you can go back and watch it on YouTube and LinkedIn, all the different places. We'll also push some things out via social media. But yeah, we'll see you guys next time. I think we won't have another one of these until after the Thanksgiving holiday. Right. So if we see you, have a great Thanksgiving, and we will see you the first week of December.
Thanks so much, Jonathan. Talk to you later. Bye, guys.
Thanks,